sit outside and argue all night long about a God we've never seen but never fails to side with me. Sunday comes and all the papers say Ma Teresa's joined the mob and happy with her full-time job.
And we are live once again with your hosts of the Tau Glass podcast, Trent the Wizard, Kevin the Viking. If you've ever wanted to spend time with a wizard and a Viking, this is your chance.
Yes.
Trent, it's great to see you again.
Always a pleasure, Kevin.
Yeah, so this is exciting. Just quick reminder, and especially for newbies just joining us on Tau Glass, Trent and I, this is what all you're going to see is what Trent and I normally do. Like we just decided we've been exploring the universe and philosophy and physics together for some period of time now. And at some point we decided to hit record and share our conversations with others. So that's all you're going to see here. It's unscripted and we just riff on a wide variety of topics that have to do with philosophy, as I said, metaphysics, quantum physics. And then so today we're going to get into biology a little bit and how that relates to, our physical beings and spirituality and the universe. Just a teaser for the next episode. Next time we're going to start going deep on some topics of physics and metaphysics and quantum physics, which I think for those of you who have been following along so far, I think the next one's going to be a real treat. Not that this one isn't, but actually I don't know that. Like I said, it's unscripted, so who knows? Who knows?
Depends on your flavor preference, right?
That's right, exactly. Yeah, this could be the most boring episode ever, or the best.
It's for you to decide.
That's right. Yeah, so a couple of quick shout outs and then we'll get started. So thank you to Steve Peterson, who is our resident producer / editor. He's doing great work for us, pulling these episodes together and making sense of our rants and our riffs.
And making it sound better. Thank you, Steve.
That's right. Yes.
I promise I will have a microphone for the next session.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same. Yeah, we will be investing in better technology because why not?
Yeah.
So the other thing is, please do feel free to put any questions or comments in the comment section below on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. And the other thing is the Tau Glass store has been resurrected. It is reopened on Shopify. And over time, we're going to be adding some clever merch that is, again, this is a spiritual journey. So it's really not about the commerce as much as it is having more tools and education materials that you can tap into, more ways to interact with us. And it's just some fun stuff that you may enjoy.
Yes. I'm excited. It's going to be cool.
Yes. So now that we got the administrative stuff out of the way, Trent, there's something that's been in my head. That's how all these conversations start. One of us will say, hey, I've been thinking about this one thing and I want to get your take on it. So today, and I'll be honest, man, like I've never explored this with anyone. So I'm very excited about having this opportunity for you and I to go deep on this subject and riff on something that I think is fascinating. I will just admit that I feel like I don't have my head around it, let alone my spirit, right? And the topic is, we're gonna get into biology a little bit, but it's so much bigger than that. So the topic really is genetic memory and spiritual memory, and why any of that stuff works at all. So that's part A. But ultimately, in the spirit of Tau Glass and helping helping each other, helping ourselves and helping each other better understand the universe and energy and everything else. Like, I think the underlying theme here that I want to get to through this exploration of biology and genetic memory and nature versus nurture is it's really about gracefulness and being graceful. So with that, I'll kick us off. So genetic memory at a very high level should not exist. It just shouldn't. Like, on some of our prior discussions, we've talked about like the miracle of life and the miracle that we're actually here, and that chemicals have reacted in such a way that somehow, depending on your belief system, we turned into conscious beings from a pool of chemicals, and we are now reflecting on the universe and reflecting on ourselves and all of that. So if you get to the point where you can accept that life is a miracle and that every moment is precious and it's not given to you, it's something that just is, and your vision and your philosophy will take you through life and beyond. Even if you can get to that point where you're like, okay, yeah, I get that. Yeah, that's sure. I got it. Yeah. Chemical reactions. Yeah. I'm mostly a glob of bacteria. 80% of the DNA in my body is actually not human. I'm cool with all that other stuff. If you can get to that point, the next leap is, well, what about genetic memory? What about nature versus nurture? And so let me just finish this piece, and then I'm very keen on hearing your thoughts. So the example that I want to give is that a golden retriever, when born, does not need to be taught how to retrieve a ball. It just does. And you don't have to teach it much to get it to retrieve a duck, like on a hunting trip. It knows how to do it. It may require some guidance and reinforcement, positive reinforcement on technique, but it is born knowing how to do that. Other examples would be like fish, whether they're mammals like dolphins or whales, or fish like salmon. When they're born, whether it's from an egg or because they're a mammal, they're live birth, they don't drown, and they don't need to be taught how to swim, right?
Just do.
They just do. And then similarly, like deer in a forest don't need to be taught how to be a deer. Like they don't need parameters around like, well, you should go to the meadow during springtime and eat the grass and the flowers. And during the summer, you might be able to hop over somebody's fence and eat their vegetable garden. Like you don't need to teach them that. They just do. And it's graceful and it's perfect. And it can also be violent. Like the animal kingdom is a very violent place. There's predator and prey at every level. And again, like, well, I was going to say like, killer whales popped in my mind, right? Orcas. I was going to say that they don't need to be taught, but they actually do teach their young how to hunt. But they're really teaching them to be better hunters. It's not that a whale with very little instruction would not be able to catch a fish, but they do learn, or they do teach, and it's kind of funny. There's a matriarchy there where they find that several generations of female whales teach hunting techniques to the newborns. But it is, and it's violent and it's brutal. Like they will go out and seek a young seal pup and beat it to a pulp and then eat it. And that seems horrible. Like if you watch it on, say, National Geographic or something, it looks horrible and violent and unsettling, but it's just nature being perfect. So whether it's deer hopping over your fence and eating your vegetable garden, or it's an orca teaching its young how to hunt a seal pup, Like this is all part of nature, and it just is. And a whale doesn't presume, it doesn't get born and think, oh, I'm vegetarian, and start eating like seaweed,
Yeah.
kelp. Right?
Nope.
It's born a certain way, and it has certain attributes that make it very, very good at being an orca, and it just exists. And so, just taking this full circle, like in my opinion, I don't know if it's opinion. It's let me say it a different way. I find it striking and extraordinary and almost unbelievable that data sets like how to hunt or how to be or how to behave or how to swim or how to run are imprinted and passed on through genetic memory. And this is obviously a real thing. But seriously, man, like how does that work? Right? How is you know, I don't know. Let me just pause there.
Yeah. I have some really interesting thoughts when it comes to nature versus nurture. And I think that saying nature versus nurture is not necessarily a great way to say it. I think that it's nature nurtures. Whatever that thing may be, nature is nurturing us, right? It's not one or the other. It's not nature or nurture or like pitting them against each other, but rather I think a symbiosis of the two. Kind of like we said, there's this matriarchal, generation of orca whales that is nurturing their young and teaching them how to survive within the world. And I think that's why it kind of goes hand in hand. You know what I mean? The same thing that we, for example, trees. There's deciduous trees and there's pine trees, you know what I mean? And they will actually, through their root system, we know this scientifically now, that plants will transfer nutrients to one another depending on the season and the need. Like, well, I have too much of this, so I'm going to transfer some of this over to this neighbor plant, call it for lack of better words. Do you know what I mean? And they nurture each other through that nature. The nature of things is to, and that's, I think, kind of getting into a thing of the nature of things is to help survival in whatever that looks like for whatever organism that may be, whether it's a tree, whether it's an ant, whether it's a mammal or a fish, right? There's this natural instinct, which, as we've said, is kind of like the genetic memory. Like you're just born with that. Like it's not something that's necessarily learned. It's something that is inherent. There's actually a philosopher that talks about this. Immanuel Kant talks about a priori knowledge. A priori knowledge is basically knowledge that we come into the world with, instead of like, do we just learn from experience, or do we actually know some things when we show up here, right? And so that's really when like I start thinking about nature and nurture. I think that they really go hand in hand, because we see that throughout organisms in the way that they naturally nurture themselves and other things around it, whether that's because they're prey and so they're nurturing. For example, the seal pup is nurturing the orca whales. Without that seal pup, does that orca whale survive? What does it eat? Do you know what I mean? How does it go? And so I think that there's kind of a fluid, give and take within that concept of nature and nurture, because we naturally have this knowledge that we come into the world with, you know what I mean? And then there's the nurturing part of that, you know what I mean? I think of like a seed, for example, you know what I mean? Like a tree seed, call it an oak tree, right? That little acorn has the natural aptitude to become an oak tree, but it does need to be nurtured by the environment that it's within in order to fulfill that potential. And so, yes, it does have a basic limited knowledge, but it may need to like learn to do something different, right? Like it got dropped into a shaded area, and so it has to grow like this and out and above in order to capture enough sunlight to reach its full potential, right? We see plants do this all the time, and I think the kind of the same thing with animals. You know what I mean? There's certain animals that can thrive in really extreme environments, whereas others would just diminish and die. You know what I mean? There's just no way that they could survive in that natural environment because they don't have the natural instinct to survive and nurture themselves, or be nurtured in some sort of way. One of the other things, so with that a priori knowledge, I think that bring that kind of full circle to us as consciousnesses, intelligent consciousness that is aware of ourselves, and we question the universe in ways that other animal life forms and creatures don't. I always like to bring it back to a little bit of religious philosophy type style, but there's this idea of so I grew up Mormon. For people who don't know that, that's how I grew up, was within that religion. They had this really interesting doctrine and idea about where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. Anyone who's ever talked to like the two elders in like a white shirt and tie with black tags, you're gonna hear this story. It's called the Plan of Salvation. But essentially, there was this whole council. God brought all of his children, his spirit children, together and said, I want you to become more like me. And so we're going to send you down to this place called Earth, and you're going to basically go through this testing environment. Like, for lack of better words, like, we're here to learn. We're here to learn and develop and become more, right? But this was a conscious choice. We chose to do this, right? There were two. There was Satan, and then there was Jesus, or Lucifer, the son of the morning, the first son, and then there was, Jesus. And Satan said, oh, well, I'm just going to make everybody do the right thing so that we make sure that everybody gets back. But that's not, and then Jesus was like, well, I'm going to go down and I'm just going to show people how to do things and let them make their own choice instead of forcing them to do that, right? It's kind of like this difference of approach, so to speak, to the whole situation. And 2/3 of the host of heaven decided that they wanted to go with Jesus's plan, and 1/3 of the host of the heaven decided they wanted to go with Lucifer's plan, and Jesus won out. And so we're all here now, being able to have this free agency of choice to do this. Now, this is what I was taught as a very, very young age, right, through the religion. But what I've come to understand in studying philosophy and studying different religions and really kind of diving deep on this is that there are miraculous stories about this kind of stuff. One of my professors in college actually wrote a paper when he was, looks like back in the 70s, at some point when he was, finishing up his PhD in philosophy. But his paper was on reincarnation, and that we've actually proven that reincarnation happens. And one of his biggest things was there was this little boy who was born, and when he was like 2 years old, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way that he could have known anything about the modern world, you know what I mean, as far as like airplanes and things like that. And he saw this World War II plane, and he was like starting to talk about it in so much detail that his parents were like, we've never shown this to you. How do you know this? How is this possible? So they started going and seeing a therapist. And it turns out that he was a World War II pilot that had crashed into the ocean. And this kid had remembered where it was. Like, they found the plane. Like, it was this like whole thing, literally proving that he used to be that person. Now, one of the things that I say in the sense of kind of bringing this back to like nature versus nurture, I think that we have, as divine intelligence, as beings, energetic beings of the universe, have realized that for our own progression, for our own development, we needed a natural environment in order to go and, kind of like a testing ground, so to speak, to go and learn things, to go and experience things, to go and develop, you know what I mean? How to nurture the divine self of ours. And that's one of the things that I really, truly believe in as far as us, and this is, we start getting into like more esoteric, sciences and things that where people are like, well, that's just kind of hooey-fooey baloney. And it's like, well, that's your choice. Like, you need to choose to believe in what this means or not. You know what I mean? Like psychic mediums and, there's things like that. Like, my wife and I have gone through past life regressions where, it's like, how did we come how was it that like we just like decided in this world did we come together? And it turns out it's like this kind of a cool story, you know what I mean, behind it, where like I was a soldier and I'd had my right leg blown off, and she was a candy striper, and she was there at the moment of my death. And at that point, we had made this soul contract. And that's where I think that like this genetic memory carries over, because we are, and again, my own personal belief is that we are these eternal intelligence. We are this eternal spark of the universe that is developing ourselves further and further and further. You know, we talk about Earth. I mean, and this is very common in a lot of different cultures and a lot of things that we're like, Mother Earth, Gaia, is actually a living thing. It's, you know, she has a soul, and is nurturing us and has this relationship with the sun. And that's that vibrational relationship between the two of them is what allows life, us, to basically flourish here on Earth, right? We're not so close that we burn up, but we're not too far away that we freeze up, you know, in deep space as we're flying and hurtling ourselves through space. You know what I mean? It's just, it's this perfect harmony. And I really do believe in that like vibrational energy and carrying forward in that genetic stuff. I mean, I think that's kind of why we all have our own personalities, right? We're not just these copies of humanoids, right? We're these unique individuals that have different preferences, that we make different choices, and we do different things. And I think that's for a reason. It's for our own development. There's, for some reason, that experience that we are going through, the things that we ultimately choose, is something that we have previously decided on, like, I need to be in this type of situation in order for me to develop my divinity, to develop my intelligence, and to develop my energetic universality of beingness. So that's really, you know, and that's kind of where I, you know, coming back to Kant and that a priori knowledge, I believe that's where that comes from. That genetic memory comes from the fact that, like, we've been through multiple lifetimes, you know, and this is also, you know, coming from the philosophy of St. Augustine back in like the Renaissance period, and his concept of the hierarchy of souls, and how our soul progresses through this testing ground of being within the world, right? At first he was like, well, you're all the rocks, and then you're all the plants, and then you're all the animals, and then you graduate to humans. And then after that, you graduate to God. That is kind of like his stepladder of how the soul progresses through existence, which, you know, when you start thinking about it that way, it's like, well, yeah, maybe the earth is a lot older than just 6,000 years old. Maybe it's, you know, billions and billions of years old. And maybe this isn't the only one, right? Maybe there's other worlds and like and things like that we have also, you know, gone through in order for us to progress ourselves. But I mean, these are all kind of really out there ideas, but when you start thinking about it more cohesively and comprehensively, it kind of starts to make sense in like a certain level of like, well, yeah, that would make sense, you know? And whether you believe it or not, I mean, that's completely your choice. And that's the beautiful thing about it, is that there isn't this forced regime or regimen. It's this thing of, when you're ready, you show up and you start doing differently, you know? And I think that that's kind of part of the grace thing that we're talking about, in that a priori knowledge, and like, you just know things. And when you really decide, and when you really start to believe in whatever it is that you're believing, through that practice, there is this grace. And one of the things that I love, as far as like helping people to understand, how do I develop grace? Well, the slower you go, the faster you get there. We're always in such a rush to accomplish things. We're always in such a rush to get to the destination. But if you've ever noticed, for example, if you're on like a road trip, I'm very much this person. It's like, if I'm on the road and I've got 12 hours of driving, it's like, I just want to drive and get there, right? Because I want to start experiencing the destination. But you forget along the way that there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things going along the way. And if you slow down, and it's like, normally it's like no bathroom breaks. We're driving straight through, right? But if you stop and, you know, smell the flowers a little bit, you take a little bit slower, you discover some beautiful things. for example, this, well, with me and my wife, we drive quite a bit from Utah down to Southern California for family reasons. And, randomly we were driving one of these times and she was like, hey, there's this natural hot spring in the middle of a field halfway through Utah. It's just like, and it's just on someone's land. And it's like, let's go check it out. So we did. And it was an incredible experience. I loved it. It was very spiritual in the sense of like, wow, I am like sitting in this mountainous field in a hot spring that I don't know how deep it goes. And it's very enjoyable. It was a very pleasant experience, right? What did I learn from that? I don't know. Maybe, again, the slower we go, the faster we get there. That's very much a principle in yoga as well. People just want to get through those positions. They just want to move through the movements and just get it done. But the slower you go, the more you start becoming aware of these micro areas of your body where maybe you're not carrying your weight properly. Maybe you're too far onto the left and you're not shifting your weight properly. Or maybe, I'm not spreading my fingers the way that I should, keeping myself active, right? I'm letting a little part of myself kind of go dark, so to speak, or get a little lazy. And so that's one of the things that I think of as far as developing grace is really go slow. There's no rush. Life only comes at you as fast as you let it.
That is right. Yeah, and I would agree with that notion that most of the reason we're here is for exploration and adventure.
Yeah.
It's all about having experiences and internalizing them, like feeling the experiences, not just observing.
Yes.
And there's so many ways we can take this right now. So it just flashed in my head. Like, I think one of the detrimental things about the current era we're in, where everybody is carrying a supercomputer in the palm of their hand, is that it's a distraction from experience. Like, people are very quick to take a selfie or take a picture of something. Most of the time, the things they're taking pictures of can be easily found online. Like, you go to Google Images and find that thing. You don't need, like, the world doesn't need another picture of that thing. But there you are, taking a picture of it. And it's actually, in a way, I get that can be a way of capturing an experience and remembering an experience, but it's also a distraction from fully being in the moment and having the experience and living it and exposing all of your senses to it, right? So there's that. The other thing that popped in my head while you were talking is that I'm still trying to reconcile. Okay, well, how much of me is biological versus spiritual? I mean, for lack of a better term, on a data level. And as you were talking, I was considering that it's possible that our DNA, because our DNA, it has been proven now that a single strand of DNA can carry a ton of data, like a ton. There are computer scientists now that are looking at using DNA strands to imprint data. Like, it's more efficient than, say, a thumb drive. It holds more data, and it's better organized. So we are very close to using biologically created tissues or things to imprint data. So while you were talking, it occurred to me that it's possible that that DNA is the firmware, and we have spiritual memory that we inject from our energetic metaphysical being.
Yeah.
And you put the two together, and that makes that thing whole. So, like, a DNA strand for an orca, as an example, makes the construct of a whale. It has certain characteristics that make it able to survive in a certain environment. But there's energy that is required to run it. It's like your solenoid is the software. So your body is the firmware and your soul is the software. And each is required in order for you to be you and to function. So absent your spiritual energy, you're just a bundle of flesh and flesh and bone and
Bag of
water.
meat. Just a bag of meat.
Bag of meat. That's right.
Bag of meat. So one of the things that I really like about this, in the way that I think about this is something that I've learned from several different sources, but it really kind of hit it home for me when, when I was studying yoga and teaching yoga. Is again, I talk about this all the time, the 5 bodies, right? You have your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, your intellectual body, and your spiritual body. So if we kind of think about those different things, again, you have your firmware, that which cannot move. Then you have, I don't know what you would call this, but that which feels the movement, the emotional body. That
The
which,
UI UX.
yeah, exactly, the UI UX. And then you've got your mental body, that which decides to move. So, that's like your command functions. And then you have your intellectual body, which your intellectual body is that which knows and is aware of the movement. So it's kind of like your background type functionality. And then what I would think of your spiritual body is that which rejoices in the movement. So I would think of that as like more kind of like the electricity that makes it all happen. And so when I also think about things, and I think about energy and vibration, as Nikola Tesla talks about it, that's where you're going to find the secrets of the universe. Now, we've talked about this before in the sense of like vibrational energy is kind of like music, right? There's low, like really big wave tones, and then there's really high wave tones, right? It's light, just like light. If you take the light, spectrum, and you were to put it out into like 2 feet, we're only like be able to like observe like maybe like an inch, a very small portion of that light wave that we can actually see. Like we can't see gamma waves, we can't see X-rays. We've developed technology to detect and view some of those things now at this point. But one of the things that I like to think about is that, in the way that like yoga and some of these other philosophies and cultures have talked about it, in the sense of that, this is kind of going back to like cause and effect. The causal realm is the spiritual realm, is the spiritual vibrational frequency. And energy and light coalesce down through the intellectual, mental, emotional to the physical, right? Think about a thought. First, I think about something, and then I feel about it and decide to do something with it, and then I act upon it. So think about that process. First, there's this little thing that just kind of like bleep, comes in. That's your spiritual. And then you become aware of it, your intellectual. Then you decide to do something about it and feel a certain way about it and act upon it in a certain way. All the way down, coalescing through the spiritual, intellectual, mental, emotional, and physical. Thus manifesting something here, whatever that is, whether that's words, whether it's movement. Do you know what I mean? Like there's this whole coalescence. And so really what this is here is this, and I say here, within the world, this experience is really that coalescence of all of our intelligences coming together, deciding to come down here and be here, specifically at a certain time, you know what I mean, of space and time, like, and that position. Yep, that's where I'm gonna slip in here. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And like, so realistically, that's how I view the world and like view experience, in the sense of,
Yes.
and I think this also kind of comes back to like people following your gut or following your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
There's something to that. That's why they say, like, on a test, probably like your first gut check or your first intuitive, like it's probably that answer. You're more than likely going to be right on it rather than wrong. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
I think this is because like that spiritual self of ours is perfect. It is that perfect part of the universe that is melding itself down into this bag of meat, and trying to figure out how to operate within this lower vibrational frequency. So
Yeah, so I think that what you just said is super important, because it's and I've heard you just describe the 5 pieces a few times, and in a way, this is the first time that I really been able to connect all the dots. And what just occurred to me is that this is important and necessary for us as humans to be able to understand, because different fields of study will give you completely different viewpoints and beliefs on what a thing is. And what popped in my head is like I've heard psychologists say that my dog, as an example, has no emotions, that it is just a biological entity and it is only reacting to stimulus. And any emotions that I think my dog has, it's me projecting those emotions on the dog. And when a dog appears to love me, it's really just manipulating me for a treat or for a scratch on the chin. I find that whole line of thinking totally offensive.
Yeah.
Because I know my dog and we have a connection that is beyond me being walking meat stick and it being a walking fur ball.
Yeah.
We have a connection. And I can see in my dog's behavior, it's not just a reaction. It's not just stimulus and reaction. There are times when my dog doesn't look happy. It looks sad, and I'm not projecting sadness on it. Its tail is down, its ears are down, its head is slumping. And it may be for a reason that I know about or a reason that I don't know about. Obviously, like if I say ride in car, it goes crazy. It's jumping up and down. It clearly is excited and happy about the notion of riding in the car. It doesn't need to ride in the car for its survival. It's not going to eat it. It's not going to eat the car. It's not going to procreate, hopefully, in the car. But it's like it is excited about the car ride. And so what you were just saying about all these pieces coalescing makes sense to me, and I think it's important because we do need to. I think as a species, we do need to reconcile not only how all this ties together on a physical and metaphysical level, but also how to reconcile these data points and these fields of study. Or when people say, "Well, a dog is a canine." It's been passing down this DNA for millions of years. At some point, it decided to stay in the human's cave because there was symbiotic relationship where the early humans needed protection and an alert system if there were intruders or predators present. And this animal needed a warm place to sleep and food. So there was symbiosis happening. That's the only reason that man and dog ever started cohabitating. And then it just all evolved from there. So that's one piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle. It's just not.
No.
Right? The dog does have genetic memory, as we talked about, like retrievers. They know how to retrieve. Different species know how to do certain things at time of birth, even if they're separated from their parents or their family or their siblings. If they are adopted as a puppy before they open their eyes, they still have that data set. They still know how to do certain things. Some of it's instinctual, some of it absolutely is genetic memory, but there are other things going on there. And like you said, there is absolutely energy that a dog, just like humans, a dog cannot exist without a spark of life. It's just chemicals. Without the spark of life, it is just chemicals. So it's got the firmware that turns it into a dog that has fur and whiskers and certain kinds of teeth and certain kind of vision. And then it has energy that actually, just like all things, they live and die. They are born, they live, and they die. When they die, it's still a dog, but its spirit is no longer present.
Right.
And so my point really is just that all of these things are absolutely working together all the time. And there's no reason for us to limit our view of a thing because we only understand one piece of that. And I feel like that's where I really was going when I started this conversation today, is that I mean, it almost gets into limiting beliefs, but it's even bigger than that, which is humans tend to believe one piece of the puzzle that they understand. And we will fall back on that and almost use that as a crutch where we're ignoring the other pieces of the puzzle deliberately because we don't understand it. It's that fear of, people fear what they don't understand. And
Yes.
so if somebody doesn't understand their spirit, then it's something to be afraid of. If they don't understand God, then it's something to be afraid of. If they don't understand death, then they're afraid of it, and so on. And all of these things are happening all the time in the universe. And to be fair, I mean, we're in a way like we are amazing creatures and spiritual creatures with pretty high mental capacity. But at the same time, we are simultaneously simple. So, if this life that we're in right now in this moment in time on earth, if we are describing ourselves as children of God or children of the universe, it may be for a reason. It may be that we have so much to learn that it's almost unfair to just expect everybody to wake up one day and go, oh, I get it. I'm physical, I'm mental, I'm spiritual. Like, I get it. And it fits in the universe, and it's chaotic and amazing and beautiful all at the same time. And I got it. Right. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, everything I just unpacked, but I don't know. I guess it's a long way of saying that all the pieces are there. We deliberately ignore some all the time, and we don't have to. We can't all be open and aware of all of it. We have that capacity, and it is a learned skill. Like, we shouldn't expect that. We shouldn't expect it to just all of it to come naturally.
It's a process, not an event.
Yes. Yes.
To meld all this stuff together and to go through this stuff, like a flower, you don't just plant a seed and the next day you have a flower. Like, that's not like an event that just happens, right? It's a process over time. And I think that that's one of the biggest things to remember, is that that process will take longer or shorter depending on who and what you are, right? Trees, for example. For a redwood tree to get to its full maturity, it takes a long time to get to that kind of size and stature, right? As opposed to a wildflower, which goes through a life cycle within a season, one season. It goes from seedling to full maturity blooming flower and done again within a number of months.
Yeah, a lot of insects survive less than a full day.
Right.
They're born in the morning and they're dead by night.
Yeah. But I also got to think to myself, their perception of time is probably different than ours. Like, one of the
very different.
There's this fantastic cartoon. Of course, I'm blanking on the name right now, but this girl's dad is trying to view these smaller little creatures that ride hummingbirds, these little people that ride hummingbirds and through the forest and do things, right? And they move really fast. And us, to them, we move really slow because we're these big things.
Right.
We're moving fast, but we're not, right? Not in their perception.
Yeah.
It's kind of when you go to swat a fly, it can see your hand coming as soon as
you
know what I mean? You
might
catch one off guard every now and again. Do you know what I mean? But for the most part, they see that coming way before. You think I'm getting that thing, and no, it's already gone. You know what I mean? It's flown away.
Yeah.
And I think part of the thing too, as far as understanding specific things and really trying to put those pieces together, there actually was a philosopher who tried to do this for the sciences. I had a really big issue with this when I was going through my studies and really learning about all this, where I had this frustrating issue with science because it wants to use math as this truth deliverer. Well, if it's not empirically true, if you can't math it out, then nope. And numbers are so much more than that. There's literally a whole branch of philosophy called the philosophy of number.
Right.
What does that even mean? What is a number? What does that talk about? Now, one of the books that I've recommended really goes through this. This gentleman, Michael Schneider, he does a fantastic job of really bringing this all together. He's got a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in math education. It's amazing. So the book is called A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, A Voyage from 1 to 10, Archetypes of Nature, Art, and Science. And it's an amazing book. Each chapter focuses on one number, and it's like the first chapter is a monad, right? And this is kind of one of the things that I always like to tell people. It's kind of a fun little brain breaker, is like, well, tell me what 1 + 1 equals. Everybody's going to say, well, 2. And I say, you're wrong. 1 + 1 equals infinity. Because when you actually construct them geometrically and you put 2 circles together, you get what's called a vesica Pisces. And because of the radius and the center point of those 2 circles, you are then able to create and construct all of the rest of the numbers, 3, 4, 5. You can create a triangle. You can create the pentagram, you know what I mean? Like all of the different shapes that create all the numbers are now open to you by putting those 2 together. So 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It actually equals infinity. Your ability to do this. Look up the flower of life. The flower of life is this geometric symbol that literally contains all of the mathematical proportions and dimensions for anything that exists within the world. Literally anything. You can find it within this structure. It's amazing. It's a very interactive book. He actually tells you to draw in the book, because the more that you put pencil to paper and you draw these things, and you're involving more of your senses. And so as such, you're getting deeper learning. You're opening deeper pathways, because not only are you reading about it, but you're looking at it, you're using your hand and your tactile ability to draw with it. I also recommend maybe using a specific scent, whether that's a candle or an essential oil, something like that, and even a color of pen that you use with each one, because that association, that memory development will be absolutely mind-blowing and amazing. But that was a little bit of a tangent. What I was going to say is Gottlieb Frege, he's a German philosopher that tried to unify the language of all of the sciences through logic. This was his project. And his project ultimately failed, realizing that like it wasn't possible. And this was actually shown to him by this 19-year-old kid, also a famous philosopher, that basically was writing to him through letters, because they didn't have smartphones at the time, back in the early 1900s. And he asked him a question. He's like, how does this set of all sets contain itself? So he was trying to like make this giant set of language, right? That, biology, chemistry, and, all the different types of science could use as this unified language to create greater understanding. And unfortunately, it's not possible because of those different perspectives. That's kind of like saying, well, English is the universal language. Well, it's like, well, no, it's not. I speak Portuguese, I speak Spanish, I speak Italian, I know it's a little bit of German, a little bit of Korean, a little bit of Hindi. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, and those all express themselves in different ways. They write themselves in different ways. They emote in different ways. And that was kind of the thing of like, well, if you have this giant set of all things, how does that set contain itself? It can't.
Right.
So it's a paradox. And I think that learning to resolve that paradox within all of this experience that we have as far as our consciousness and intelligence is really important, to realize that, yes, one cell has the genetic material to recreate myself, right? A DNA strand has all of the genetic material to recreate, clone me, right? Yet somehow this is containing all of that. And yet somehow I am floating through space on a cell of the universe, the Earth. Like, think of it as a cell, one tiny minor cell in the galactic universe that is just, but it has all of the information for the rest of the universe. So synecdoches, I've said this term before, where a part of the whole is a complete whole, is a complete replica of the whole.
Yes.
So, and I think that's really kind of the paradigm that we need to resolve and get comfortable with, like things, Things are
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, quantum physics, as we talked about, you know what I mean? Like we think I'm touching my fingers together, but we know that there's always more space. And then you get down to quantum physics and then things get real weird. You know what I mean? Things, quantum locking and like.
Yes. Yes. And we are going to get into that.
Which on just like a little quick brief thing, I think that that's part of what comes into this genetic memory. How does that happen?
Right.
Quantum,
right.
on a very quantum level, that information is getting coded into our spiritual body, our intelligence.
Yes.
So that when we move and pass along from life form to life form, and we move throughout this existence of the universe and we're reflecting upon ourselves, that's why they call it remembering, because you're remembering, you're putting things back together.
Yes.
It's not that you're discovering something brand new. No, you've already always known it.
Yes.
But you do have to remember it.
Yes.
So
well said. So I did scribble a lot of notes while you were talking today, and we have, as usual, we have more. This conversation has stimulated more conversation. We have more questions than answers.
Yes. Let's remember some more.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And there's a couple of things we didn't get to that I would love to on a future episode. We will. We are going to go deeper on physics and quantum physics the next time we meet. But I know I've heard you say a few times, expressing that, the whole remembering piece. And it also occurred to me that recognizing is another example of that. Being cognizant of something. There's so many words, and I actually would like to take one episode at some point to just focus on words and how we use them, because there are words that we use so passively every day that have so much deep meaning, and we just blurt it out like it's, oh, I recognize that. Like you just say it like you just throw that word around like it's just, it's just one of 15,000 words in your vocabulary. Right.
Yeah, no big deal.
Recognizing is actually a big deal.
Yes. First of all, you had to be cognizant of it sometime before, and then you recognized it when you experienced it again, which.
Right. And then you're able to express that to somebody else.
Yes.
And that's just like, wait, what? What just happened? And we take that for granted. It happens all the time, and we take it for granted.
Every day, every moment, every day. That's happening all the time.
Yes. Yes.
Wild.
Yes. So we do need to wrap up, but we have so much more to talk about. So thank you again for exploring this with me today, because it's I like we talked about, I love doing this. I love these conversations. I love challenging mind, body, and soul to do better and learn more. And it's just it's really a fun and rewarding process.
It really is. I mean, call it the true journey, right? Like if you were to ask me, I feel like learning to really wrap your mind around this kind of stuff and decide for yourself what is meaningful and what is not is the true journey of this experience, of this life that we are currently in.
Agreed. And that is the very essence of Tao of Glass, taking it full circle, right? What is in your glass and how useful is it? And is it useful for you, or is it useful for somebody else? That's another episode too. It's just talking about trading what's in your glass. There's things in your glass that are not useful to you, but they're very useful to somebody else. And you can pass it on or trade it or gift it or sell it or whatever. That's another conversation as well. So for today, wrapping up, we always wrap up with musical shout outs. And so what's your musical shout out today, Trent?
Today it's going to be Odessa, 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 My Friends Never Die is the song.
Awesome. Love that. All right. And mine today is Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth by Primitive Radio Gods. This is like a late 90s song, but I'll just share, I'll take 15 more seconds on this. So I'll just share the funny epiphany I had with that song. So I had this on my playlist for years. I've listened to it 1,000 times. So one day I was on a plane and I was mostly asleep, and this one line in the song hit me that I had never really realized before. Like it hit me and I woke up and I was like, what was that? And I had to back it up. And this is for a song I've heard thousands of times. And the lyric is this. We stayed up late and argued all night long about a God we'd never seen who never fails to side with me. And I was like, wow. So there it is.
Truth from the roof.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Well, everybody, it's been a pleasure. One last thing I'd like to leave you with, as a part of our little exercise, after our shout outs, is slow down. Take some time to breathe. I want you to take 5 deep breaths and see how that changes the way that you operate. Just 5 deep breaths. It's very, very short. Breathe deep in the belly, all the way up into the chest. And see how that changes your paradigm. Try and slow down. You'll get there faster.
That is great advice. Thank you, Trent.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a pleasure as always. And we'll be back doing this all again on a different but related topic.
Yes.
Thank you, Trent. It's awesome.
Thank you, Kevin. Love you. Love everyone. See you soon.
Cheers.